On October 27, 1962, two Soviet officers had already voted yes to fire a nuclear torpedo at the U.S. fleet. One man voted no, and that's the only reason you exist. Soviet submarine B-59 had been hunted for 3 days by 11 U.S. destroyers and an aircraft carrier beneath the Caribbean Sea. The sub had lost radio contact with Moscow for days. The crew had no idea whether nuclear war had already started. Inside the sub, temperatures had hit 60 degrees Celsius. Crew members were collapsing unconscious from CO2 poisoning and heat stroke. The captain Valentin Savitsky was convinced the war had begun. He ordered the nuclear torpedo armed and loaded, a warhead the size of the Hiroshima bomb. On every other Soviet sub in that fleet, 2 votes were enough to launch. B-59 needed 3 only because of a random staffing assignment. Outside, the U.S. Navy was firing depth charges, blasting searchlights, and dropping 50 million candle power flares. The Americans called it harassment. The Soviets experienced it as an attack. The third officer, a flotilla chief of staff named Vasily Arkhipov, said no. And because all 3 votes had to be unanimous, the torpedo stayed in its tube. Arkhipov had watched 8 men die slow radiation deaths just 14 months earlier on another Soviet sub. He knew better than anyone what a nuclear weapon actually does. When B-59 surfaced and returned home, the crew wasn't celebrated. A Soviet admiral told them it would have been better if they'd gone down with the ship. Arkhipov never received a medal or acknowledgement. He retired quietly, developed cancer from the radiation he'd absorbed in 1961, and died anonymous in a Moscow suburb in 1998. His family had no idea what he had done, until strangers flew them to London 19 years after his death to give him a posthumous award. The man the Future of Life Institute calls arguably the most important person in modern history spent his entire life making sure no one ever knew his name.